All right, we are finally ready to kind of get started with our actual scene here. So let's do the first few steps and see if we can get everything imported. So first things first, I'm gonna hit A in object mode and delete everything I have here, just the default stuff. Then I'll click File, Import, and select OBJ, which is what exported from 3D Code. And let's go grab that. And here we are with all the different sets that we exported from 3D Code. Now, remember, I knew this was going to be quite a few, ended up being 19. What we're going to have to actually do is import these one by one. It's a little bit time consuming and a little bit tricky because I'm not going to import them all at once because I think that would be too heavy for Blender. So we're going to do a little bit of an odd process here. So first I'm going to click first set and import OBJ. And that's going to take a second because that is, even though we decimated it quite a bit when we exported it from 3D Code, it's still too heavy, and we're going to decimate it even further in Blender. So it just imported there, and we aren't seeing anything, and that's because the scale in 3D Code tends to be way bigger from that grid, compared to that grid, than the grid in Blender. So we actually should select it and then hit tilde and view selected, and we'll see it was scaled way, way up. And that's just that little piece that we exported in that first set. So that's completely fine. I don't want to scale this down just yet because everything that we import is going to place in exactly the right spot in relation to each other. So I don't want to mess with the placement at all. But what I do want to do before we import everything else is just decimate this a little bit. So I actually am going to click over here to modifiers and add a decimate modifier. And I'll keep it on collapse, and I just want to change the ratio to something really small. Let's try even like 0.1. And I'll hit enter, and that'll take a second to calculate because this is still really, really heavy object. And I don't know, it should update live. I don't even know if you can see any change there. It might have gotten a little bit low res, and you can see if I zoom way, way in, we're starting to see actual triangles in there. So we don't want to go too much further than that. So let's just apply that. And that'll take a second to calculate it as well. Hopefully not too long though, there we go. And now if I just hit tab to go into edit mode, we can kind of check the progress here. It's too difficult to see in vertex mode, but if I switch to face mode, we'll start to see something like that. And that is about the right density that I'm looking for. I think we could even decimate it a little bit further in this case because there aren't too many little tiny details. And all I'm looking for, by the way, is just the most decimated we can get it without losing quality of detail, right? So if I zoom in here, I don't want these edges to get too much more crunchy than that. But the decimate modifier does a really good job at guessing where to place the detail. So let's do it one more time. So add modifier, let's decimate it by a little bit less this time. So let's do even like 0.6, let's say, and apply that. And that went really fast because it's a lot less heavy now. And if I tab in, you can start to see it's finding areas that it can reduce density. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's actually a lot less dense now. And it's saving the density for these really high detail areas, these sharp corners. So that's about as far as I would take it. I would now import the next set. But real quick, I just want to kind of show you what happens if you decimate too far. So let's add that modifier on one more time. Let's do another 0.1. And you see now it's getting real low res. So this is too far. We're getting some triangulation really apparent in the whole object. We could actually, if we wanted, there are workarounds though. If we wanted to go this low, if you had kind of a slow computer, if you wanted to apply this, you could actually just right click and shade smooth. And in this case, it's not looking particularly good because we did go too far, but in some cases that might still work. So let's go ahead and just Control Z that back. And let's Control Z again so that we don't get that triangulation. So this was about where we were happy with it. So we'll stop there. And so now I just kind of have to do this process for each set individually. So I'll import the next set, set number 2. That'll take a second to process because that New object is going to be real heavy again, but it will place in the perfect spot in relation to the other object, so that's nice. And now be careful when you're going to decimate this next object, because the first object is still the active object, even though I've deselected. So it happens to me a lot where I accidentally apply the modifier again to the one that I've already decimated, and I don't want to do that. So I've got to make sure that I select this one, and now it's the active object, and now we're going to go through the decimate process again. I think 0.1 or maybe 0.2 in this case, because it's a little bit more details in there than I think this piece had. And yeah, if we zoom in there, we're actually getting a little bit too much decimation. So I'll raise that up to maybe 0.4. It'll take a second to calculate, but we should be able to see it live. Yeah, there we go. That's about where I want it. You can try how shade smooth is going to look on that. Oh, I should have applied the modifier first, but that's okay. Yeah, so you see in this case, shade smooth is working a lot better, and that's because it doesn't have all these kind of like cuts in there. So I think we're going to be happy with that. Let's apply that modifier, and we're going to go through and import all the remaining sets. So I'll probably just jump ahead and kind of show you when it's done here. But yeah, that's the process I'm going to do, and I'm going to decimate them one by one as they come in. All right, so there you have it. We've imported all the different sets, and we've gone through kind of that decimate process on every single one. So if I select some of these here and tab in, you'll see we're at a somewhat reasonable amount of triangles now on all these different sets. And remember, because we kind of exported them in sort of random segments from the 3D coat layers, they're kind of separated and grouped up in ways that don't really make sense. So these objects shouldn't probably be in the same object as that, even though that's kind of just what happened from 3D Code. In this object, this doorway, you'll see there's like a piece here, which I think must have been a Vox hide segment, because it's not actually even visible. So we're going to want to delete that in a second. But so yeah, there's a little bit of cleanup to do here. So let's do that real quick. So in this case, all you have to do is hit tab, and I'm going to hit the letter L to kind of grab all these little segments over here, and all the ones that I think should be in their own kind of piece. And I'll hit P and separate by selection, and then tab and select away. And now we'll see this is in its own object, and these are kind of grouped together in a way that makes more sense. So I'll probably go through and do all that right now. For this piece that was kind of floating here, to delete it, I'm just going to go into tab, and then the hotkey to go into ghost view is Alt-Z, and that'll kind of let you see through all the objects. And I'm just going to hover over, hit L, and delete those vertices. So Alt-Z to go back into regular viewing mode, and I'm going to go through and just group everything that should be grouped together, and that'll make the next stage a lot simpler. All right, we're making some progress here. So I'm just trying to select the areas that kind of should be grouped together now, and I'll hit Control J to join them. And you don't have to worry, even if you want to re-separate them later, they'll still be separated if you hit L, right? Because these meshes had a cut in them, so the L key will still kind of grab them separately. So we're not doing anything destructive right now with Control J and L and P. We're just grouping things for our own kind of satisfaction here. And I just wanted to show you, remember we added those windows completely separately, so they ended up exporting kind of separately. So I will probably try and add those right now, separate them, but with the L key, and just join them with the segments that kind of make sense with Control J. Just so that when we are selecting and duplicating things around, it's not going to be so confusing. And we'll probably add up some more windows in a second too. Looks like this one didn't get a window, so let's go ahead and add one right now. So let's select that. We'll grab that window, P to separate again, and I'll just Shift D over here. And from the view, and I was just trying to see it from the front view just now, but actually this all imported at a slightly different angle. So I'm actually going to hit A to select all. And let's see if we can rotate this with holding the control key to snap to segments. I'm going to just get it so that when we do go into front view, we're kind of seeing the actual front of everything. All right. So kind of one of the first things I want to do here is just get a little bit of a mirror reflection going, because this has been only half the palace the whole time, and we really want to see the whole thing. So the million ways to do that. We could apply a modifier to each one of these objects and mirror modifier and link everything. But I'm actually going to do it with an instance collection. So everything's in this collection right now. I'm just going to call this Palace side 1, I guess. Palace side. And let's select everything in that collection. And let's set all the origins of all those different objects to the 3D cursor, just so that they're in the correct spot there. And that's right on the world origin by default. And now if we right click on this collection and instance to scene, we should get another instance of that group placed in exactly the same spot. And all we need to do is hit N to open up this menu here. And under item transform, we're just going to change this X scale to negative. So I'll just add a negative sign there and hit enter. And that'll flip everything that's that entire instance, I guess, on the X axis. So now if I deselect, we finally have a perfect mirror of the palace. This is a lot closer to the sketch, the original vision that we kind of had here. We can still kind of adjust the placement of things. So if I move things in here, they'll adjust over there. And this is just going to be just going to make everything a lot easier. So one little mistake here, though, I did have this doorway in that collection that we instanced, and I don't actually want it mirrored. You can see it's mirroring in a weird way because it's not quite on center actually. So let's just grab that doorway and I guess this piece too, and let's move that by clicking or hitting the letter M and putting it into its own collection called door. And that one isn't being instanced, so we're not going to get it mirrored anymore. And then let's select the objects there and just kind of center them with the mirror, which would be a little bit to the left, right there. By the way, while you're moving things in Blender in any kind of scenario, you can hold the Shift key and it'll move it a little bit slower. So normally it would be like that fast and it'd be kind of difficult to center this perfectly, but I'm hit G and then the middle mouse button and then held the Shift key to kind of slowly shift it over. Okay, so now we have the original collection, the instance collection, and then a separate door collection. All right, let's do a little bit of organization here and upkeeping before we move further. So first things first, let's add a camera in just so that we really know what we're doing, and it'll place right there. So I'm just gonna move it kind of over here. I'll scale it up a little bit just so that we can see it in proportion to everything. And if I click on the camera icon, we're looking the wrong direction. So let's look up. And I just want to get a general sense for the scene right away so that we get something the most dramatic that we can. Now it's moving a little bit too slowly right now in the walkthrough or fly-through mode, even though I'm sprinting with the Shift key. I'm going to click to accept that, and I want to split up our viewport here. So I'm going to click View, Area, Vertical Split, and I'll select this right about in the middle. Now we have two completely separate viewports, and we can use them in completely separate ways. So basically, I almost always work like this, and this side's just going to be our camera view, and this side's just going to be our workspace. But if I go into top view and move the camera now, we're able to see the camera changes live a lot faster. So generally speaking, just place it there for now. We're going to probably make a lot of different cameras later and get some really dynamic views, but I just want to kind of see things right now. And then let's also go ahead, viewport display, and up the passport out, just to make everything outside the boundary box black. All right, so the next thing I want to do here is just add in some very basic kind of flat color materials just so that we can match what we had in 3D Coat and get a feel for the design before we add in anything else. So I'll switch this over to material view, and everything's white right now, and this is going to require a little bit more cutting pieces apart. So let's create a new material first. So there's 100 different material slots on here, and that's because all the different pieces exported from 3D Coat all had their own materials to each little slice. So what we actually want to do is just minus all of those, delete all those slots, because otherwise it'll be a bit confusing later. And then we'll just add a new one, and we're just going to call this green for now. And let's make it actually green, but try to get somewhat close to the value that we had in 3D Coat, just so that we get a feel for it. I actually have it up on my other monitor. It feels a little pastel, maybe a little darker than that. Let's just stick with that for now. Maybe a little bit metallic even could be kind of cool, but I'm still not sure what the final material on these will be, so I'm not going to worry about that just yet. I think it was a little bit more yellow as well. Let's say we're happy with that. And then to apply the sort of gold trim, I'm thinking I'm going to assign them without separating them from this object. So let's hit L while hovering over those to just kind of select them here. We'll create a new slot, create a new material, we'll call that gold. And we'll assign that, and you can see it's changing right away, and let's change that to a nice gold. And there's something weird happening, and it seems to be that there was a doubled up of those materials, and I think it's the gold is fighting with the part that's actually green. So let's hide this by hitting H for a second to see what's happening. Okay, so it looks like the cut is just overlapping in just the wrong spot. So let's just extrude it out a bit. From the top view, we'll just scale it a tiny bit out so that those triangles don't fight with each other. That looks pretty good. Let's just stick with that. Let's up the metallic on this because we definitely want that to be kind of gold, maybe lower roughness as well, so it's a little bit shiny looking. All right, and I've sped up the video a little bit here. All I'm doing is I'm going to go through the entire palace and just link up all the materials that we've already created throughout everything here. So nothing too crazy. Just remember to select the object that you're going to grab the material from second, and then hit Control L and just link materials. And you can do multiple objects at a time this way. I'm just going to adjust all these different areas just with these two values right now. I know in the sketch earlier on, we had kind of considered doing a different type of material for the roof of the palace, and we don't end up going that direction. In the end, I think just having this two value green and gold read kept everything very cohesive with the design, and that's what we went with. All right, there we have it. So let's go find our camera. Okay, so I usually keep my camera in its own collection just for easy finding, and it looks like we forgot to do that. So don't want it in this door selection. So I'll click that camera and just put it into its own collection. I'll call it cameras because we will be adding more later. And now we can easily kind of grab it, and I just wanted to zoom out a bit, maybe from a lower angle as well. Okay, it's looking pretty good. So we'll try something next before we get into making these materials, more realistic and adding in textures and everything. Just wanted to get a feel if there's any sections here that we can try. Oh, you know what? We forgot to do this tower. Let's do that really quick. So let's make a green slot here. So yeah, I just want to duplicate a few more elements and see if we can create some other sort of supplemental building shapes in here. And try and duplicate them around. See if we can get something that feels a bit more like a city supporting this palace. Let's try blocking out with just some simple cubes, and then we can add on some of those decorative elements in a minute. And I've sped up the video here once again, just going to block in a few of these really simple assets and just be careful about which ones I'm putting into the collection that's being mirrored and which ones are going to be centered here. And essentially, I just wanted a few steps that kind of lead up to the palace center there. All right, so let's see what shapes make sense to include here. Thinking let's try and grab something that could be used as a flat platform to take the place of this block out. So let's try this piece. I'm going to Shift D that actually, in case we make changes later, it won't be linked and mess up the other side. And let's put this into the block out elements collection, just so that doesn't get mirrored. And here I'll just add in some of those elements in a bit of an array. In the back of my mind, I was just kind of thinking they could look a little bit like a flower or petal structures. It's looking kind of cool. Let's try some other camera angles real quick. I just want to see, I kind of still want to try getting this from a lower angle, just to see if we can get a nice like dramatic angle. There we go. Yeah, it's starting to look pretty cool. Something like that. So we're actually starting to get, I believe, some camera clipping. So let's select the camera itself and adjust the end point to 100,000, just in case we do have any elements back there. And now if we, expand this ground plane way back, we won't get any problems. All right, that's pretty cool. So I like how it's kind of unfurling there, and I'm thinking maybe there could be one more kind of platform. So maybe it would be some smaller elements, and maybe these smaller elements could be in between here just to kind of enhance the petal flower effect. And I probably should set these origins to the 3D cursor. Oh, if we do that, they're all going to move because they're being instanced. That's fine. We'll just manually kind of place them halfway. I think they could be a little smaller. Yeah, let's do that. That's pretty cool. Maybe a little lower. And I'm thinking of adding some stairs so that you can kind of walk up this thing towards the entrance. So before we do that, and before we do anything else really, I think it's finally time to kind of add in a scale person, just so that any stairs and any other elements we add can kind of get a feel for the actual scale here. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and make a new cube, and it'll place right there in the world origin. So let's kind of move it over here so we can see what we're doing. I think we'll place it next to the door. And let's put that person into a new collection, person scale. And I'm just going to do a couple of elements here just to like pretend for a second that this was a human body. There'd be a cube here, and then in the same object, I'm gonna Shift D that up. And I'm doing this in edit mode so that these two elements will kind of be in the same object. This is kind of a trick I've done in the past, and it seemed to work quite well. So that's going to be our little person with full head and body, and then I'll actually just create a new material, and I'll call it red. Change him over, or her over to red. And if I zoom way in here, we're starting to get something like that. I think it could be a little smaller, especially in proportion. If you imagine one of these people in the towers. So in order to duplicate it around the scene, I'm actually going to Alt D that element in a couple different places. And then that way, if we later decide that we want to change the scale, we wouldn't want to scale this whole object because it won't affect the scale of the linked objects, the other people. But if we go into edit mode and hit A and scale the actual faces, it will change the linked elements. So that's kind of like a quick way to duplicate kind of a human scale all around the scene and kind of check it against a lot of different areas, right? Because I want a person to be standing potentially over here, and I want that scale to make sense. And then I also want it to work with the windows over here. And if it's not working, which it looks like it's kind of not, because this is a little bit the wrong proportion, I can always just go into edit mode, hit A to select all the faces, and I'll scale it down just a smidge so I could see like a person's kind of looking out that window. And because we're doing it this way, it's going to change all the other, the other humans accordingly. So that's a nice little trick, and I'm going to be doing that quite a bit. And then they're also all in the same collection, so I can just close that off and turn them off if needed. And yeah, I think that scale is pretty cool. This could be kind of a nice size of the epic doorway here. I don't like how this platform is higher than the entrance, so let's lower that a bit. I do want the gold just to kind of poke up above there, just a smidge. There we go. All right, so let's see if we can add some stairs around here now that we have a human element to kind of match them to. So let's show you how to do that. So I'm going to create a new cube here. I'm going to put that into a new collection right away so I don't lose track, called stairs. And I'm going to move it out here. Let's keep it centered for now. I'm just going to scale it up for a second so that we can see what we're doing. And let's put it in a spot that will kind of make some sense. Like maybe there's some stairs leading up to this doorway. So let's actually select everything leading up to that doorway and just lower it a little bit. We forgot this element. I just feel like it'll be more epic if we have, some stairs leading up. And hopefully that'll help our camera view too, so we can see everything. All right, so now if we, this is gonna be our stairs leading up to the doorway. I'm gonna create this into the shape of just a single stair. So in proportion to this human, let's move the human down and forward just a little bit, pretend they're standing on the top there. So, stairs, I don't have like a solid rule to how large they are, but just from a general feel sense, I'm gonna start with that. Right, they're lower than the knee, but higher than the ankle. So let's just say something like that. And then if we go ahead and add an array onto here, array modifier, right now it's going on the x-axis. So let's change that to 0. And then we want to array it on the y-axis. So I'll change that to 1. And it's going this way, which is the opposite way of what I want. So I'm actually going to change that to a -1. And we also need to, array it downwards on Z. So if I just click and drag this a little bit, we'll see, in fact, let's make that a perfect -1 so that it's the exact same distance as one step. And then the steps are really, really long right now. So we actually need to adjust the Y to be a little bit smaller. So I'm actually holding Shift to make this a little bit slower and easier to control. Again, you can do that in a lot of different areas of Blender to make things slow. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. If we wanted to adjust the height of these stairs, we could still tab into edit mode and just lower this single face, right? Because that's just an instance of it. And then all we need to do is just up the count. And there's some quick stairs for you. And I'm just actually going to go ahead and edit this plane so we don't have to add too many more objects here. So just want to select this this back face really quick. Actually, let's move it out so I can easily grab it. And I'm thinking if I just push this segment, why is that adjusting everything? It's kind of getting some interesting stretching when I think it shouldn't. So I think what we need to do is actually Control A on object mode and apply all transforms. Nope, that didn't solve it. Well, you know what? That's okay. We'll just add in another box. Not sure what's going on there. So I just want to like hide underneath here with another box really quick. You know, like, you wouldn't see it under the stairs like that unless there's some sort of kind of odd modern contraption. Have you seen those stairs where you can, they're like just slats. They're very modern feeling. This wouldn't quite feel that way. It wouldn't quite be the right era unless we do go with a sci-fi design. But let's keep that decision for a little bit later. I still kind of thinking this will be some sort of elvish kind of medieval feeling castle, and then we can add in more sci-fi elements later if needed. All right, cool. So we kind of got the basics there. Let's just, that side piece that we just added, I'm actually happy it's a separate object because you can edit it separately. So I'm just gonna add a couple of cuts there with loop cut, and I'll click and then right click to accept. And then I'm gonna make sure the pivot point is on median point. And then if I double tap S, we're able to slide or scale these loop cuts away from each other without affecting the meshes, without stretching the mesh. So regular S would give us that, which we don't want. But if I double click S, we're able to kind of slide things along. And I just want these right here at the edge. And then that way I can kind of select these top elements and just extrude them a little bit so that we get some kind of more realistic, oh, we didn't want that section. Some kind of realistic railing there. Something like that. We can adjust that later. And let's actually just go ahead and, oops, we just want to link that to, link the materials, I should say. And there we have it. And then also the whole palace is now floating because we moved this ground plane down. So let's actually add in a central element. So just Shift A, add in a cube, scale it up. So just gonna give the palace kind of a base that it sits on. I guess it needs to go out to about there. And we'll probably add in some other elements behind it later. So let's give it a nice base. And then link materials. Yeah, there we go. So now this is really leading up to it. Not bad. All right, so I'm actually going to kind of jump the gun a little bit because we have a lot more kind of blocking out to do, but I really want to see how this is going to look in some kind of a lighting scenario right away, because I think it's important to set up a dynamic shot, and it'll affect where we place elements as we go. So if you watch the other section, you're gonna know what I'm doing here, but I'm gonna switch this over to the shader editor and make sure we're on the world setting here. This node is actually from a plugin I had installed a while ago, which is now uninstalled. So let's just delete that. And all we need connected to this world output is the, oh no, it's called the sky texture. And let's just hook that up really quick. And then we're gonna also need to see this in cycles and switch over to GPU compute and edit preferences, make sure that's all checked on, looking good. So if we switch into rendered view, it'll probably take a second to calculate. And right now we have film turned on, which is why we're not actually seeing the sky itself. We're getting a transparent background, so let's turn that off. That's in right here, transparent film and transparent. Yeah, there we go. All right, let's, it's looking way too bright, so let's lower the sun intensity. And the sun size, sun elevation maybe. There we go. All of those put together. Now we're getting some kind of cool backlit sunset. Let's rotate the sun a bit. See, okay, yeah, so the sun is back there. I kind of just want to see the light on the palace itself. And let's see here. So if we rotate, okay, there we go. We're starting to actually see the sun disk in the sky there. So let's up the air to see what the dust does. Okay, that darkens it and the ozone. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to see it like that for a second. Let's up the disk so we don't lose track of it. All right, that's pretty cool. And I don't know if you remember way back in the first section, we had this set of mood reference. And there's one in particular I'm thinking of. I'll pull it up for reference in a minute, but there was one that I'm kind of thinking of, which is this kind of backlit, really low sunset. So we don't have to go with that at all. It's still early days, but I think that could be pretty cool. So just wanted to see that. And this is going to affect the whole setup of our scene because, you know, there's elements that we know would look good with this type of a lighting. And there's elements that we know maybe wouldn't be as important to include. Or even like subconsciously, we're not sure. So anyways, I think it's important and very helpful to kind of get that sort of set up early, and then we can always adjust this later and try some other stuff as well. You know what? I just pulled up my reference page from the other section on a different monitor, and I had some other really cool lightings. And I just kind of want to see what that looks like right now because I'm getting excited about it. It's pretty cool looking. So I kind of like the low sun, and let's keep that for a second. But I kind of want to see just how this would look if we do get some direct light on this bad boy. Yeah, you know, like the backlit is cool, but it's kind of flattening everything out because all we're getting is silhouette information. Versus if we rotate it around to the front, we're really kind of starting to highlight some of the sculpting work that we did, and we don't want to lose all that hard work. So I'm kind of liking seeing it from the sun, you know, from the front a little bit more. But you know, we'll try a bunch of things. And what about from this side as well? I do kind of like how that highlights this left side, and the eye kind of goes from left to right. But we'll keep considering that. There's a lot we could do here. And I think it's called, there's something about a really low sunlight. I think it's like very common. I want to say it's called even like entertainment lighting or golden hour. There's just something about it that just really sells a design like this and makes it stand out. All right, so remember I mentioned I kind of was thinking this front area would be a garden. And for it to be a garden, we're going to need some plants. And we could totally do this in 2D later, but just since we're setting up a 3D scene right now, I'd love to try and get some 3D plants in there. And for that, I'm actually going to use a really great add-on called Botanique. And let me just show you right here. This is it on the Blender market. There's a lot of different 3D assets that you can import into Blender for just instant, you know, plants and trees. But this is one I've used before, and it's really, really amazing. It's got a great library. Another one I can recommend is Scatter, and that works a little bit differently. That actually applies the assets for you in kind of like a scattered way across the landscape. But I find Botanique's library is really nice. So I know it is a bit pricey. I honestly cannot remember. When I bought mine, I think I might have gotten the light version. And this is the latest 6.4 edition. I think I have an earlier one. So I don't think we've actually talked too much about add-ons at all in Blender. So let's talk about it for a second. So let me open up Blender. So add-ons are really kind of key element to Blender, I think. And it's because Blender's free and open source. People are able to create these really, really amazing add-ons, sell them as creators for quite reasonable prices. And there's millions of really great ones out there that I've used and I can recommend. And we'll talk about some of them probably, but for now, let's just see if we can install Botaniq. So I've downloaded it. So all I need to do is go to Edit Preferences and this add-on section right here. And if you just click on this install option, we are going to navigate over to Documents, where I've put all of my Blender add-ons just for real quick right now. And there you can see there's a bunch of them that I haven't installed yet in this new version of Blender. But all I need to do is click on the zip file of Botaniq, and you can see I have an earlier version there, 5.4. I could probably update it, but it's kind of large, as you can see, and I don't really need to right now. So let's just use this for now. So all you need to do is click on the zip file without unzipping it at all, and just click Install Add-on. And it might take a second, actually, with a really big one like Botaniq. You saw it was actually several gigabytes in size, and that's because it has like hundreds of different plants assets in there, and all of those plants have really high res texture maps, and that's the really heavy thing. So yep, took a second there, but there we go. That wasn't too bad. And you should see the add-on that you've just tried to install, and it's there now. And all we need to do is just check it on. So now it's in there, and I'm going to X out of this. And now that I've done that, if we go over to this side and just hit the N key, we should see all of our add-ons on this little side menu right here. And this one right here, Polygon, or what is it? Polygon IQ, that's actually the Botaniq add-on that we just installed. I think that's the name of the company that makes it or something. So if I click on that, we will see this menu here. And I'll just show you kind of how I use it. So let's go out of rendered view for a second in case this gets a little bit heavy. Let's go ahead and click Spawn Asset and get this menu here. And this drop down here is a bunch of different types of plants that the add-on has pre-installed. And let's just try deciduous for a second. And then once you've chosen a category, you just click on this thumbnail for a bunch of options for plants. And this menu is actually even larger. If you just hover down at the bottom here, you can start to scroll, and you can see it's even larger than that. Especially the deciduous category is really nice. So let's pick one that we like here for a second that might work with our scene. And you can see there's a lot of different kind of times of year that these plants fall into. I'm kind of thinking some of these willowy, weeping willow ones would be pretty interesting. Let's see how that looks. So if you do go ahead and click that, that'll be the one that you're going to import. And then there's this make editable option. I believe if you keep that off, it'll be a very light instance in the scene instead of having all of the geometry of it in there. So, but in some cases you do want to check that on because then you can edit the color in the nodes. So let's actually make it editable for now. And then if I just click OK, it should spawn in our scene right at the origin point. So let's view selected there. Oh, you know what? We don't have it selected. So it placed it right at the bottom here. So there it is, tree, and that's the type of tree, and it's the summer category. Now if I view selected, we'll be able to see it. But let's go to top view and kind of move it out here for a second. And there it is. So yeah, these assets are really, really nice. And they're also set up for Blender from the Blender market, right? So all the alphas in the views are working correctly. And that's very tricky to set up if you're not importing an asset that isn't made for Blender. So very nice. And then also, let's just, because we checked on make editable, and if we go down here to the shader, we're able to actually see the material. So if we switch from world over to object, this is the actual material of that tree. And if we wanted to, we could actually adjust the colors of the tree, saturation, the value of the trunk even. We could also add in our own nodes, which you know, we're not going to probably need to do, but we'll see once we place everything. So here's the trick with this stuff though. These plants will be really, really heavy if we just duplicate them all over the scene. So we need to set them up in kind of an intelligent way. So let's first things first, this will be the original tree. This is the one with all the geometry, and then we'll just instance it all around our scene. So let's actually put this one down here so that it's completely not going to show up in our scene at all. And let's take a look here, and then let's also put it into its own collection. Tree, willow, I guess, in case you want to add more types. And there you have it. So now, if I set the origin of this object to 3D cursor, which is at the world origin, and then right-click the collection and instance to scene, we should get an instance that's placed in the exact same spot. And you can see there it's scaling towards the 3D cursor right now. So let's set the origin back to itself actually. There we go. And now we have an instance that's going to be much lighter on our scene, and you can see we have one up there, and then this is the original. So we're actually not going to touch the original at all. In fact, we might even want to hide the collection that it's in. If I just check that off, it'll completely disappear just so that we don't accidentally make changes to it and move things around, which we don't want to do because it would move all the instances. Okay, so now we have an instance here, and let's just try placing that in a couple spots. First of all, I want to scale it in relation to our human for a second. So let's just put it right next to our human. I think it could be a little bigger actually. Yeah, something like that. It's kind of tricky because these trees are usually huge, but this one in particular looks a little bit small in comparison to a lot of willow trees. Yeah, something like that. That's close enough. All right, and now I'm thinking there could be kind of like a line along one side here. And let's place this on the ground for a second, and we'll edit all this, but we also need like kind of a different type of material for this to sit in, but that's okay. We're just going to place these for now. And let's duplicate that instance along this kind of pathway here a few times. Grab all three and duplicate them that way. And then let's all put all of these instances into their own collection. So you can put instances into new instances and those instances into more, and you can really get things nice and optimized. So let's call this tree collection. And there's our first tree collection. And what I want to do with this is just mirror it with the same trick that we did with the palace over to the other side. So in order to do that, I'm going to right click this collection, instance that to scene. And now we have this set over here. And I'm just going to put that right over here. So now every time we make changes to this collection, oh, you know what? We need to actually flip this, do the same trick where we go over here, hit N, and then go to item and flip the scale to on the x-axis to negative. There we go. Or we shouldn't have moved it at all actually, because it's being scaled across the world origin. Okay, so now if we move one of these other trees, yeah, it should update on the other side. There we go. That's nothing new. We already did that with the palace. So now all we need to do is start duplicating trees on this side, and very, very quickly we'll get a mirror. And let's rotate some of these on the z-axis just so that they don't all look too similar from a distance. Maybe we can even scale some of them up. Continue to like make changes. And I'm thinking this can kind of be like a nice little walking tree path area that, a human can kind of walk along. In fact, let's go grab a human and duplicate them over here just so that we get a sense for the scale of this area. So this is kind of a nice long walking boulevard. You'd be able to like look out, and there it is. Let's go over to material view. There's the human. Let's add a few more, just kind of walking along on this pathway. Yeah, that's feeling about right. That's kind of what I was looking for with this little tree-lined garden. Let's try adding another type of tree even. So if we go back to Botanique and spawn another asset and then click on this, let's grab a different type. I want something that feels very elegant, I think. Also, I don't want to go with any of these winter options, just because that wouldn't quite match our, the feel of our scene. Yeah, I like some of these tall kind of birch options. Oops. But I don't want it to be too odd. I don't want it to stand out and kind of draw the eye too much. There's almost too many options with this, honestly. They all look so good. Let's just do this nice beach. So I'm going to make that editable as well. And I'll place it into scene. And if we scroll to the bottom of our collection, there it is. And let's also put this into its own collection here. So let's make this, let's put this near the other tree actually, just so that we don't lose track of it. So this will be our little original tree set that we're going to duplicate all around. And thinking if we put this into a tree beach collection, and then let's set that origin to the 3D cursor so that it places in the same spot, and instance that to scene, and there we have a tree beach instance. And then set that origin back to itself. There we go. All right. So this is a different type of tree, but it can go in the collection that we already mirrored. So let's put that into tree collection, and there we have it. So now we have a different type of tree in the same collection that's being instanced or mirrored across. And now we can continue working with them in the exact same way. I think this one could be a little bigger actually with this. The feel of this tree is a little bit bigger in proportion to the humans. And let's see, maybe this golden section up here is where these trees are kind of planted, something like that. And I know we haven't like worked on this bottom area too much, but it might be interesting if we just place a couple of trees there for now. I just want to get a sense of the layout. Maybe this is like another pathway over here. It kind of points to the center walking path. And we might add like a little river in there in a few minutes. Show you how to set up a nice water blender real quick as well. Oh, and let's rotate and scale just a couple of these so they don't look too duplicated. All right, it's looking pretty good. In fact, let's actually check this in rendered view. So definitely want to make sure we're on GPU for this because this is going to be a little bit heavy to calculate. And I'll save the scene in case it crashes and hope for the best here. So these are all instances, so it shouldn't be too heavy on the scene. In fact, there we go. That was pretty darn quick. And if I just kind of zoom in here, kind of check on this. So I'm liking how the willows are looking, and see how long that's excuse me, how long it's taken to calculate now because these are pretty heavy. But the willow one is looking a little bit too dark for me. So let's see if we can even adjust that. So let's see if we can adjust that live. So I'm going to open up the the beach one. Yeah, the beach is looking too dark. So I'm going to click on that, and because we made it editable when we spawned it, we're able to access the nodes here. And let's see if we can find the adjustment that we need to make things a little bit darker. I guess maybe value would make sense, right? I'm not able to go in, and this is just the nodes that imported with it, so I'm not quite familiar with their structure. One thing that we could probably do very easily is just add in a adjustment to the base color node. So all I need to do is when I hit Shift A here and search for RGB curves, which is my preferred adjustment, and then I'll hover over this link in between here and place it by clicking. And we should be able to adjust that just like Photoshop curves if you're familiar with how those work. You can see there it's getting brighter. You can also adjust the individual red, green, and blue channels here as well, but pretty happy with that. Actually, I guess they're a little bit too green. It's like very saturated. So could maybe push it the other way a little bit, get some redder values, just a tiny, tiny bit, maybe a little bit yellower as well. All right, yeah, that's looking a lot better. Okay, looking pretty good. Let's keep moving. All right, so I just realized we made a slight mistake just now, and all it was is that these trees down here, we actually placed on the left, and they're being mirrored across to the right, which is the opposite of how everything else works. So let's just quickly grab them, move the actual elements that are being instanced over to the other side. I guess we have to do these one by one if we want them to go in the right place here. There we go. And just to double check that, if you have something selected and you hover over the layers here and hit the period key, it'll jump you in the stack to where that is. And we'll see that we're in this tree collection. And if I just hide and show that, we'll be able to check that, yeah, everything's on the right side being instanced over to the left. Okay, looking good. So before we go any further, I want to try adding some kind of a some more logic to the way these trees are being placed. So we could try a couple things. We could try making kind of a whole line of dirt or like patch of grass there that would realistically have trees growing out of it. But I want to try instead maybe designing a little planter that all these can grow out of. So let's just make one really quick and we can adjust the design later. So I'm going to go ahead and Shift A and place a cylinder, and it placed right there, and we're happy with for a number of vertices here. So we're just going to move that kind of over here, and let's go into solid view. And let's just design it over here really quick. So all I'm thinking is that if we go into tab here and add a bunch of loop cuts, let's try doing that fall off method that we talked about in the other section, where if we hold Alt and select a whole loop and then hit O to turn on proportional editing, then start scaling this up and kind of get sort of a planter shape here. Maybe the last part would kind of come out a bit more. All I want is something that might be found in this kind of a kind of fancy environment. Yeah, there we go. It's kind of what I'm looking for. And I'll just right click and shade that smooth for now. And I guess we'll try and make a little bit of a cut in the top. So I just select this face and inset that inwards a little bit. All I'm going to do is extrude it downward just a smidge. Maybe another one just a little bit more. Oh, you know what? Let's turn off proportional editing. Yeah, there we go. That's all, just to have something that looks like the tree could kind of sit in there. And let's go ahead and apply a gold material to this. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so let's put this over where the original trees were and kind of place it underneath there. I think we're, yeah, an orthographic view, gotta check both. Let's just place it kind of like that for now. And we need to place this into the same collection that the tree is being instanced from, and then it'll apply to all these instances here. So I'm just gonna hit M and put this into tree beach. And it should apply to all of the beech trees. And it looks like it did, but they are too low in the ground, which is completely fine. Let's just select them really quick, kind of check over here and lift them up a little bit. There we go. And I guess we have to do the same to these as well. By the way, I'm just hiding and showing the overlays with Shift-Alt-Z is the hotkey there. And we'll just move that up a little bit. All right, cool. And if we wanted to adjust the scale of that planter, we can always go back to the original and adjust it there, and it'll adjust them all here. And if we want to change the design later. Let's do the same with the other tree. So Shift-D, I'll move that over here. And then we need to place it in the other collection, so tree willow. And now that'll place here, and then it looks like we kind of need to grab all these as well and just push them up a little bit to make sense that they're sitting in the ground there. Just the ones on the right, because the other ones are instances of instances, right? There we go. All right. So let's kind of see how this is looking in the camera view for a second. Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for. I think maybe the scale of the planters themselves needs to be adjusted. Maybe they're a little bit too big. So that's completely fine. Let's just grab them, make sure we're on individual origins pivot, and just shrink it a little bit. Yeah. Oh, we shouldn't move them up because that'll change their position in relation to the actual ground, which is a bit of a problem. We can always adjust the placement of the trees themselves in a minute too. Yeah, let's just say that for now. And it's fine if they're going into the ground a bit, I guess, because we don't have to see the whole planter. It could just be a part of it. All right, let's just stick with that for now. All right, so now if we are grabbing an instance of that, or one of these trees, and then duplicate it, it should take a planter with it. So we can kind of continue to design here. So just to talk about the layout of this garden for a minute, I'm kind of thinking you could walk along this path next to like a kind of the river here in the front, and then you would circle around over to the side here and maybe find some stairs that would go up. So let's see if we can place a couple more stairs. I guess we already designed this set of stairs, so let's grab that. And in case we want to change the scale of everything later, I'm just going to also put those into their own instance. So it looks like some of it is already in the collection. This piece is not, so let's move that into the stairs collection. And then we'll do the same thing where we set the origin point to 3D cursor, instance the stairs to scene, and then set origin back to the geometry. And now we should have an instance in the same spot. Yeah. Okay, so that's the scale of stairs in this current scene. So let's not mess too much with the scale of those individual stairs, because then it won't make sense in relation to our humans. So that's fine. We can just kind of use this piece in a few different areas. Just want to make sure there's a pathway to get to the entrance there. So let's say you would kind of walk up here. Let's even place that right there. And then from here, you might go down to these little flowers. So let's duplicate that and see if it makes sense to put it here. Something like that could be cool. It's got to be a real possible angle that that a human could walk down. I think we need to adjust this a little bit just so that it's meeting that angle at a realistic way. That's fine for now. And then I want to see if we can place another stairs at the bottom here. And let's adjust the orientation to normal, and it should slide along itself there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we didn't adjust the actual scale of any stairs whatsoever. We just pushed them into the ground a little bit when we needed to, and that's completely fine. So now we have an actual kind of pathway, and then we need to make sure that's being mirrored over here. So let's put these instances into the collection that's being mirrored, which is the palace side is the main one, and now they're instancing over here. And we can probably add in some more of those. I wonder if there would be another set on this smaller one. So let's duplicate those over here and see if that makes sense as well. Maybe this one should be adjusted to center with it a little bit. So let's see if that makes sense. So you'd walk to the end of here and you'd get to the stairway, and you would walk down to the ground floor. Yeah, something like that. And all of that's being instanced over here. And we're starting to see that underneath here. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So let's adjust the original stairway to extend these pieces back a little bit, because it's kind of weird that they just end where this kind of shape starts. So let's go back to the original instance. And I guess we just need to adjust this side piece. So if I hit the question mark key, we'll actually go into this mode. I don't know what it's called, but it just sort of isolates that single piece that you're trying to adjust, and kind of hides everything. And you could just hit that again to bring everything back. So I'll tab into that, and now I'll tab into edit mode, I guess. And let's just extend this piece way back. Oh, let's grab these faces as well, so that this kind of all comes with it. Oops. Not sure. Oh, we need to switch over to global. Now it should just go straight back. So now we should be seeing that change live in all of these instances. So let's hit question mark to double check things. Yeah, so that stairway is now being pushed way, way back, which is, I think, what we wanted. All right, cool. So we kind of have some idea of how these staircases are going to work. And we can continue to adjust the design of them to fit with the general layout, but I think as a whole, this block out started to make a bit more sense. Let's also sprinkle some more individual humans around those staircases just to kind of check on them. And don't forget, every time I'm duplicating one of these scale humans, I'm doing it as a linked mesh with Alt-D. Again, so that if we want to change the scale later, we can. So walking down these stairs, get to here, this kind of platform lookout area, and then there's another staircase here. I'll just kind of put a few on the staircase just to remind myself of the feel here. Yeah, I think that's working. So let's adjust these trees though at the ground floor because they're kind of blocking the path of the staircase. So let's just delete that one. Maybe there'd be a couple in between here, and then make space for the that last staircase. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Looking good. All right, let's see if we can add in a little bit of water. We talked about maybe making this central piece a little bit of a canal or a river. Let's see if we can do that. So let's add in a mesh and we'll make it a plane. And let's put this into a new collection. I'll just call it water elements for now. And we'll move that plane over here, scale it up a bit. Let's start out with this, this channel. So I'll lower it down here so that it would make sense that it's kind of being channeled down underneath these trees. And let's stretch this out so that it kind of goes through the center there. Cool. And for now, let's just add in a blue material for that. We'll talk about making realistic water when we get to texturing everything, I think. But let's just add in new slot and create a new material and call it water. And then change that to a nice blue just for now. I guess we can already kind of lower the roughness just to make it reflective. And we're not seeing that from this camera angle, so let's just shift over here. It's a little too saturated for me, so let's just lighten that up a bit. Cool, there we go. So I'm kind of thinking we could design the rest of this garden layout with some more water elements. So let's see if we can get something cool. So I'm gonna duplicate that water element over here. And let's actually lift it above the ground just for a minute so that we can see it from top view. And I think if we change some of these shapes to be a bit more matching the shape language of the rest of the palace, so instead of just simple rectangles and squares of water, maybe they'd have some more interesting shapes. So let's try that. So I'm actually going to tab into edit mode and select a couple of these vertexes. And let's see what happens if we bevel those. Now nothing's happening right now, and that's because we have to change, when I click to accept the bevel, we actually have to change, we get this menu here to adjust the type of bevel, and I have to change that over to vertices. And so now we see that we were successful in beveling the vertices. And I guess we could see how that would work over here as well. Maybe just a little bit of a different shape. And I'm kind of thinking this could also sort of array outward from the center. Let's change that orientation over to normal so that it scales in edit mode the right way we want. Yeah, there we go. Look at there's a little patch there. And I want to try arraying this in the correct way around. So let's actually change the pivot point to the 3 cursor, which is kind of the center of our palace. And now if we hit Alt-D and then click to place, now if we rotate that new element, it should array from kind of more of the center there. So let's try something like that. And let's put these 2 elements into the palace side so that they're mirrored in the same way everything else is. And now we just need to extend this ground plane. I don't want to stretch it too much, so let's just grab this face and extend it out so that we have space to work with. Yeah, so that's kind of the general sense I'm kind of looking for. And now we can get it, now that we have those like building blocks there, we can get into adding in some little walking paths and really build this garden out. Cool, looking good. While we're here, let's add a little bit of a like a little architecture for where these pools might sit into. So let's hit tab to go into edit mode here. And I think I want to do this in the same object in edit mode. So let's shift D that face down a little bit. And let's extrude it down a little bit. And then let's hit L to select that new piece there. And let's actually put it, let's actually scale it up a little bit, but not from the cursor. So let's do that from the origin, scale it up just a little bit. And I just went into isolated mode, by the way, with the question mark key. And all I want to do here is move it up on the z-axis a little bit, then select the top face, inset just by a little bit, and then extrude downward so it goes through the water. And now this extra element that we just created, let's hit L to select that. And let's create a new slot in this object and make that slot, let's make it gold. And then assign that new slot to those faces. There we go. I think that's what I was looking for. And then this water piece isn't quite going to the end there, so let's select that and just scale along the normal orientation just a little bit, just so it's crossing through the edge there. Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for. And I did that in edit mode instead of adding in a new object, by the way, just so that it would kind of place automatically in all of these linked objects and instances. Because if we had just made a new object for that, we'd have to manually kind of place it in all these spots again. So yeah, same kind of trick we're doing with the human actually, where we're linking everything so that if we need to change the scale later, we just do that in edit mode. All right, and let's add a little bit more to these elements. So if I go into edit mode once again and just select this top face here, and I'll shift D that face and then scale it up a little bit. And I guess I'm gonna lower it a little bit to the ground for now. And I'm thinking I might separate this later and add a solidify modifier. So I'm not gonna make an extrusion for that just yet. Let's try just selecting an edge here. Maybe we can extrude that out, but it needs to go along the normal orientation. Now it'll go in the way we want it to. And let's try that on the other side as well. Extrude that out. Maybe that could sort of feel like it's coming from the central area there. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then maybe when we have some walkways in here, we'll have like little bridges that you could walk over these elements. You know what? Let's go ahead and hit L to select all that, and right now just in global extrude that down just a little bit so that we kind of have that section slotting into the ground. And then I think we will need a little bit of an edge trim as well. So let's go back into edit mode and let's see what happens if we alt click the faces. We should select all the edges all the way around. And in this case, I am going to shift D to duplicate that and click to place it. And then that's just to kind of separate it from that mesh. And then we'll extrude that. We'll extrude it, but then we'll hit escape to cancel the movement of the extrusion, but it's still extruded. And then I'll scale it out a little bit in both directions, actually. Oh, so it's not quite oriented the way we want it. But I think it's good enough. No, let's not do it that way, actually. That's going to get confusing. Let's try that again. We'll alt-click, select all that, and we will shift D to separate it. And now we should have that completely separated. And let's P to separate that. So now it is in its own object. So it'll only be in these front two now because it's not linked to those, but that's fine. And let's change that to the gold selection, and then let's add a solidify modifier. So right now it's just a face, it has no thickness, and if we add a solidify modifier, we'll get a little bit of a extrusion and we can adjust the thickness that way. There we go. And we can lift that up little bit so it's above the water line. Yeah, there we go. Oh, you know what? It did place over here. And that's because, or did it? No, it didn't. That's interesting. That's just the golden light that made it look like it did. So we actually need to, so it is instanced over there, but we need to duplicate it and rotate it around the 3D cursor again, just so that it's right in the same spot. And I'm holding Control, by the way, to snap it to certain degrees. There we have it. So now we have linked. So the gold trim here is a linked object. And then this whole middle section is another linked object. And I'm liking how that's looking. It'd be cool. I'm liking how there's like a double tier to this water element. I feel like there could almost be a third tier in the middle there. So let's try that. So I'll select this one that's linked, and I'll just hit L to grab those elements. And I'll Shift D, move them up on the Z axis. And let's shrink them down on the, but oriented to the individual origins. Just, oh, you know what? Let's do a median point actually. So they go together. Yeah, something like that. That could be cool. Maybe that could be even smaller, just so it's like a kind of a focal point in the center there. Yeah. Yeah, looking pretty cool. Let's add that golden trim to the central canal as well, since we've kind of established that. So let's do that with the solidify method, since that worked the best. So I'll select this box, go to edit mode, and just select this side right here, and Shift D, and then click to place it in the exact same spot. And now that I've duplicated that element, if I hit P to separate it, we'll have a single face that's separate from this box. And we're doing that so that when we add a solidify modifier, it will only affect that. And let's adjust the thickness there so it creeps into the water just a little bit. And then of course we need to change the material to gold. There we have it. And I think we can also, so we solidified it in this direction, but I think we can raise it a little bit on the x-axis or the z-axis, just so that it goes up above the kind of the green line there. Now, before we get too caught up in these walking paths, I want to start thinking a little bit more about our camera placement, some possible angles. And that's just to kind of make sure that we don't design too much that's going to be outside of our view, that, or a couple views that we end up with. So let's go back to our camera view, excuse me, and you'll see that some of the, or just a tiny bit of the water's in there. And I do like the way this particular camera is framing the main palace, but I just want to try some other options. So I'm going to select the camera here, and I'll hover over here and just hit Shift D to duplicate it, and I'll move it a little bit and place it. And then you'll see we have a new camera there. And if we have that selected and we just hit Control 0 on the numpad, we should switch over to that as our active view. And now we should be able to move this camera around. And let's switch into material view to do that, just so that it updates a little bit faster. And it's moving a little bit slow with the walk or the fly through method. So let's just move it this way. Basically, I just want to see if a little bit of a wider view could be cool. Maybe we could raise the camera just a little bit like that. Yeah, I just want to see how that'll look. Maybe a tiny bit of a wider angle. Right now we're on 50. That's very long lens. Let's try 48 or 45 for a second and see how that's going to look in rendered view here. And we can always switch back over between camera views just by selecting the other one and hitting Control 0 on the numpad. All right, so I've sped up the video here once again, and I'm just going to be moving some elements around like these trees and adding in some extra walkways. I won't be adding in any kind of new meshes. We'll just be using the geometry that we've already created and using that to kind of extrude outwards to create little walkways. generally speaking, I try to work this way as much as possible. It just saves a lot of time rather than reconstructing everything. And you should always try and use what you've already created to build outward. A lot of this garden area doesn't actually end up in the final painting, of course, and that's completely fine. At this stage, we're just trying to build out a world almost for our own sake, and later we can, keep experimenting with camera views and seeing what kind of shots we want to make. If we wanted to make a lot more shots, this kind of world building would be really useful. But for now, again, we're just kind of getting a feel for this space. And as in addition, if you were to hand this scene over to, a CG team in concept art, that's quite common. You give your 3D file to some 3D artists to really build it out and make it work for production. Then having all this thought through and having all this spatial relationships kind of work in human scale would make a lot of sense. All right, I want to try using some of these instances that we've created now and just duplicating them in a few different places so we can really build out the scene. So let's go ahead and click on this whole instance right here. And in this case, I think I want to see if we can duplicate some of these elements, but I don't think I want to do that with the ground plane. So let's move that into another collection. So select that over here, and let's jump to that, the period key. And let's actually move that into a ground collection. And I guess we should re-instance that with the same trick so that we get a mirror. So let's instance that to scene. And then the instance we will scale with a negative on the x-axis again. And now this whole collection here should be, it's its own group here. Let's see what happens if we duplicate that. Oh, you know what? We also need to, actually, let's keep that walkway. I was going to move that into its own piece, but let's see what happens. And let's see what happens if we mirror that on the y-axis as well. So I'll add a negative sign on the y there. And what happened exactly? So it placed in the same spot. Let's try moving that over here. Let's see how that looks. I'm kind of thinking this central area could kind of overlap here. Maybe it would cross over somewhere there. And let's see what happens if we duplicate that again and then flip that on the x-axis by deleting the minus sign. All right, so now we kind of have two halves of this palace sort of facing each other. And let's move the ground plane just over a bit to kind of connect the two. And I'm kind of thinking we might try having a camera that would look towards this other half kind of from a higher angle, so sort of like from a balcony here. And there's this nice little balcony area right here that we still need to add in some scale people to, but kind of thinking people would walk along there and that might create a nice view over the courtyard here. So let's do a little bit of upkeep though. There's a few elements that aren't making sense. So this central water element needs to go all the way down the middle there. And then all of these tree assets need to be instanced this other way as well. So let's grab that whole, oh, and I guess the central elements as well. So let's find that central element in the collections here. Yeah, so everything that wasn't mirrored we put here. So we should, in theory, be able to instance that to scene and then just flip that. And I held Control there to snap it. And we'll just place it in the same general spot there. And now with the tree assets, that should all be in one group there. So let's Shift D to duplicate that. and then try flipping that on the y-axis and moving it down here as well. Oops. So we place about there. We'll have to delete a few of the overlapping trees, but that's fine. And let's try duplicating that again and flipping it on the x-axis by deleting the minus sign. And we might have to shift it over a little bit. There we go. So we should be getting kind of two identical sides of this now. It's all through instanced elements, all from that original kind of half set that we built. And here I've sped up the video once again. All I'm going to try to do is just push these elements a little bit closer together to get some more dynamic compositions. We actually end up accidentally creating some interesting patterns as these fountains overlap, so we'll just keep it. All right, now to get our texture maps, I'm actually going to be using this Quixel Bridge app. And I know we used textures.com in the previous section just to download some quick maps, but I highly recommend looking into using Quixel Bridge, and it works in connection with Blender amazingly well. It's also completely free to everyone if you have a Epic Games account. And I'm not going to go over every step on how to install it and sign up for an account and get everything set up correctly. There's a million resources that already do that completely free on YouTube and online and everywhere. So I'm just going to kind of start from once you have the app downloaded, and you basically set up a plugin, and it exports everything perfectly from this app into Blender, and then you're able to use all the different 3D assets and materials in here in Blender right away. The only caveat to that is I believe in the latest Blender 3.1 and possibly the version before that too, that plugin that exports everything for you is broken. I don't think it's been working. But that's completely fine. All it means for us is that it'll take one more extra step to import all the textures. But we're still able to access everything and download from this app. So let's start from here. And if you haven't set up Quixel Bridge app, I highly recommend doing so first. And make sure everything is set up for export to Blender. And let's get started. So switching over to our Blender scene, we've got to think for a second about what materials we even want. And I want to try keeping this general color scheme, but using photo textures that will get a nice level of realism. So let's see if we can find something for this green material to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and search in this asset, or first switch over to surfaces, because that's the type that we're looking for. We're not looking for assets or plants or anything. We're looking for texture maps. And then in here, I'm just going to start out by searching marble and see what comes up, thinking some kind of interesting sort of reflective construction material like this could look pretty cool. And you see we get all these different options to choose from. And I'm looking for something, it doesn't really matter if the color matches up quite with our concept so far, because we can adjust that in the nodes in Blender ourselves. Let's just go ahead and find something that we just like the feel of. So I don't want it to be too shiny, but I do want it to feel a little bit nice and elegant. I'm liking how this is looking, so let's click on that for a second. And if you're familiar with Bridge at all, you can adjust the export settings with this button right here. But all we need for now, let's just stick with 2K resolution. I think that'll be fine for the distance of the shots that we're going to make. And let's click download. And that'll take a second to download all the maps necessary for that. And again, the maps that you're downloading can be adjusted in this export settings. And so normally if the plugin to Blender was working with 3.1, all we would have to do is click this export button. And it says that exported successfully, but it actually, I believe, is going to import the wrong way because of, again, that latest bug. So let's go check it out. So we'll switch over to Blender. And if we select an object here with that green material, and then we click this drop down, we should find that new marble material here. But if we, let's go ahead and click on it to switch over to it. And if we go into the shader editor, which we already have set up down here, and take a look at the nodes, you'll see everything is kind of hooked up in the wrong way. So this normal map should be connected to this normal. This roughness map should be connected to this roughness node, and it's all kind of wrong. So let's actually just go ahead and delete all that. And again, that should be working correctly, but it's just the plugin that isn't working with the latest version of Blender right now. Hopefully it's fixed by the time you're watching this. But all we have to really do is click on the material itself and hit Control-Shift-T to do it ourselves. And I'm going to go over to my documents, and this Megascans library should be created for you when you set up the Blender or the Bridge app. And let's go into there. And now that we're here, we go into this downloaded folder, go into the surface folder. You can see there's all the materials that I've downloaded from Bridge. And let's go into this marble one. And now all we have to do is select the actual maps by holding Shift. So not this JSON file and not the PNG preview file, so just the maps themselves. And click Principled Texture Setup. And now it should all be importing the right way. And we can double check that. And we'll see, yeah, the normal map is connected the correct way. The roughness map is connected to the roughness. Everything's looking good now. So let's take a minute and adjust the material itself though. So first things first, the scale's way too big. So let's switch this over from the UV to the generated. So I'll just click and drag and connect that node to there. And now we can adjust the scale very easily by just clicking and dragging over all of these and then lowering them all at once. So something much smaller. And that is looking good. Now, I think what we actually want to do, instead of manually selecting all of the areas that we want to switch over to this material, what we really should do is just import these maps into the green material that is already assigned to everything. So let's switch this back over to green actually. And now that we're in the green material, let's redo that. So let's Control-Shift-T. It'll remember what folder we were in. So let's grab all these maps and set them up with Principled Texture Setup. And now that'll take a second to calculate because we're doing this in the green material that's assigned to practically half the scene. It's going to take a second to figure out how that's going to work. And there's a few errors here, but we'll get into how to fix that. So first things first, let's again switch this over from UV to generated. And unhook it there. Yeah, there we go. It just took a second. And let's click and drag over the scale and lower that quite a bit. And I think the first thing we should do here, actually, it's taking too long to calculate everything. So let's switch over to material view here. Yeah, there we go. So I'll click and drag and lower that. There we go. Now it's working much faster. And just a reality check here, the general scale is feeling a lot better. Okay, so you'll notice in a few things we need to do. So in the assets that were just simple boxes, this method of unwrapping the maps is working. But on these assets that we imported from 3D Code, it's not really, it's getting all stretched and it's incorrect. So what we actually need to do is click on the green material again to view the nodes. We need to switch all of these orange nodes over to from flat to box. And we have to do that on every single one of these maps. And now it'll project on these complex objects in a box format. So from front, back, side, everything, and that'll eliminate that annoying little stretching. Okay, so it's already looking much better, and we should still be able to adjust the scale if we wanted to, just by clicking and dragging on all three of these and kind of getting a feel for it. Now let's see if we can get some of our green color back. So in order to do that, let's drag this up a bit. All we need to do is let's hit Shift A and search for a RGB curves. And I'll go down there and hit enter to select it. And then I'll place it between the base color and the material itself by clicking or hovering between those two nodes there and just clicking, and it should place for us. And now we should be able to adjust the overall color here. So let's click into this green and up the curves there. We should get everything looking a lot more green. There we go. And we can adjust that color a little bit with these other channels here. So maybe a little bit redder just to offset that. Maybe a little bit yellower. So in the blue channel, if we go the other way, we should get more yellow. And we can continue to adjust this endlessly. And then if we wanted the actual value to be lighter or darker, we'd click over to this main curves and we can brighten it or darken it here. So let's pick something that we're happy with. And let's do a reality check here. So let's switch over to our camera view, save that, and check how it's looking in rendered view. And that'll take a little bit longer to calculate now. And let's just zoom in here for a second. So we are now getting these nice brick tiles with all the maps correctly in there. So we're getting a nice normal map. So we're getting a little bit of edge to things. It's all looking kind of the way we were hoping it would. So that's great. Now the scale of these tiles on this ground plane is looking a little bit too big in relation to everything else. And I think that is because of the way those elements were set up. So we might need to create a separate either material for that, and then we could copy and paste all the nodes into that material and just shrink the scale a bit. That would be one fix, but I'm also kind of thinking that whole ground plane might be something else entirely. It might be grass, or maybe some other type of stone or something. So let's not worry about that just yet. All right, let's set up something for this gold material. For that, let's go back over to the bridge app. And instead of searching in surfaces, all I kind of want is some wearing and scratches on the gold material that we already have. We don't really need a whole photo map texture for that. So let's go down here into imperfections. That'll just get us some different types of maps, basically. And here you can see some general options for that, some categories. But I'm not going to worry about that too much. I'm just going to find something that I feel looks like it could be on that gold material. It's just kind of a feel thing. For example, I don't think you would see like this, mud on there. I don't think you'd see fingerprints, but some of these other ones, they do look like they would have, they could appear on something like that. I do like how some of these scratches look, but it might be too much for our palace because everything is supposed to be elegant and relatively clean, and we don't want to overdo it. Even though this is called Frost, I kind of like how it looks, and it's got a little bit more subtle scratches on there, so let's give that a try. So I'm just going to download that. And I believe the export option might work in this case because there's going to be fewer nodes to reconnect, so let's try it. And let's go over here and switch to material view first of all. And let's select something with the gold material on it, and then click the gold slot and see what we can do here. You know what, let's, just so that we reassign all of the gold materials at once. Let's do the same thing where we select, let's re-import it. So we'll Control-Shift-T and then go back here. We should have a new surface imperfections category. And all that we really need is this roughness map. So let's set that up. And so all it's doing is adding a roughness, which is basically kind of the reflectivity of areas. But we do need to switch this back over to generated, just like we did, and then switch this map over to box. Now we should be seeing something on here, and you can see we're starting to get, and all that map is the roughness, right? So this area should be all shiny, and then there should be a little bit less shine where these scratches should be. And we should be able to adjust the scale on that as well. Let's just try something like that for now. And let's actually zoom in a little bit here and check how it's looking in rendered view. It'll take a second. All right, so it's just barely noticeable. It's kind of imperfections on this class. So let's see if we can add in a little bit of a emphasis to them, especially from a distance. You're not really seeing them at all. So let's try Shift A and searching for a color ramp node and clicking that in between the two maps there. And if we up the blacks on there, you see we're already getting a very different, more emphasized effect on that texture. And if we crunch it this way as well, we should see more emphasis. So color ramp is one of the most common nodes in Blender. And there's really no rule for how this should look. So I'm just going to go by feel here. And we can continue to play with the relation of these two sort of widgets here to get something that looks good. So let's go back to a kind of a wide view and see if we can get a feel for how that's looking. And it's probably hard to tell on the recording, but it is adding a nice little imperfection and scratch to everything. That's a lot more realistic, I think. All right, let's see if we can add in some kind of a grass material for this larger box area here. So let's head on over back to Bridge and see what options we have. If I just search grass, there should be some good options in surfaces. And scroll down here. So here's some options. That little check mark means that I've already downloaded it in the past, but I'm not sure that particular one has what I'm looking for. Clover patches on grass. I just kind of like the variety and kind of the thickness and depth to this one. So it says we've already downloaded it, so that's fine. We have it in our library. So let's select that, the original box, so that we're not on the instance there. And let's make a new material slot, and we'll call this grass, because we only want it to apply to this particular object. And let's go over and first let's assign all the faces by hitting A to that new material. And now we'll click on Principal BDSF or BSDF and Control-Shift-T, and then go back into our library here. And I believe it was this grass, and set that up. Okay, looking good. So let's, first things first, switch back over to generated, so we don't have to worry about UV maps. Then lower the scale quite a bit there. Doesn't have to be perfect scale, but at least in the general range, I think would help a lot. All right, and then let's also, I'm not sure if this is needed actually, but let's try switching all these orange maps to box as well, just so that don't have to worry about some odd stretching. Should work fine on something like this. Yeah, see, I'm not sure that actually changed anything because this is already just a box, but that's fine. All right, before we go too much farther, I want to try adding in a little bit of atmosphere and mist to this scene, and see if that kind of changes our composition ideas. So let's switch over to solid view so we don't mess anything up. And let's hit Shift S and put the cursor back to world origin. And in order to add mist in cycles, there's a couple different methods, but let's try this one for now. So I'm going to place a cube in the scene and scale that way up so that it kind of covers everything of importance in the whole scene. And this is going to be the mist object. So let's place that into a new collection called mist and a period to jump to it. And let's rename the object itself mist so that we don't get too confused. And all you need to do is create a new material for it. And let's call that mist as well. And instead of this principled node, we're going to delete that. And we'll hit Shift A. And instead, we're going to look for a volume scatter and place that and hook that volume node right now. All you need to do, so now we have that going. So it is still showing in the seed though, which we need to adjust. So let's go over here into the object data, scroll down, or not the object data, it's this orange object properties one. And down here in viewport display, let's change this display as to wireframe. And that way we'll still be able to see it in the scene, but it won't like block off everything in kind of an annoying way. So now it's there, and let's jump into camera view here and see what's happening in rendered view. Now probably all of the settings will be way too high, so we'll just get black. And for some reason, you generally need to set this density really low. So let's try 0.005 even. You start to see we're getting a tiny bit of a mist, and it's just darkening absolutely everything in the scene. So let's, but it's too strong, and that's why it's blocking all the light. So let's go even lower. So 0.001 maybe. That's getting to be a bit more possible. So you can adjust this anisotropy. I don't know how to pronounce that option. Basically, you'll see that's kind of like the fall off of the mist itself. So you can just mess with that and see what effects you like. I think a little bit higher in this case would make some sense. So we get a little bit less mist in the foreground, and then it's pushing everything. It's kind of working, stronger the farther back it goes in a sort of exponential way. So that's kind of the general feel. We can adjust the color, but I probably wouldn't want to do that too much. I think white is fine in a scene like this because it's already being affected by the environment. Let's just see what that does. If we change it to like a blue, it's very, very subtle, but I think in the shadows, it's getting a little bit bluer because of that. Can try making it even stronger. Yeah, you'll see it's almost like saturating, but I don't think that's what we need. So let's make it mostly white, with a little bit of blue in there. All right, and I've sped up the video here once again. All I'm going to do next is just add in a little bit of an extra design element of these trees that we've already established, but just kind of scatter them throughout the background and integrate them, hopefully with the palace a little bit. I'll try and think about a little bit how they overlap. So anytime there's a little bit of a golden shape, I'll try and overlap that with a tree right behind it, just so that the dark tree does pop against the bright gold shape. And I'm trying to work a little bit on this sort of middle bridge walkway area that we kind of established a little bit in the sketch. And we'd place some human characters there just to kind of get a feel for it. And now maybe there could be some additional little potted plants around the area. So we're getting very close now to the end of this section. Next, we'll start talking about how to create a landscape, and we'll go over how to kind of procedurally generate some kind of landscape textures for the background, and that'll be next. So I'll just kind of finish up with these trees here. In the back of my mind, I was also thinking that the very upper area could be some type of garden, and later when we get into characters, we'll start scattering some characters all the way up there, kind of walking around and enjoying the view. All right, so that kind of concludes this section of the video. So thanks for sticking with me. Next, we'll talk about landscapes, and I'll see you there.